Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Foundations of Enterprise IT, Modernizing for Secure Agile Government, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Greg Garcia, the Chief Information Officer at G6 of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Michelle Sparrow-Walker, the Department Director in the Information Resource Management Bureau Systems and Integration Office at the Department of State, Todd Simpson, the Chief Product Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services, Kelly O'Connor, a Product Manager for the Veterans Affairs Department's Digital Services Team, and Angie Heisey, the President of the Civil Group for Leidos. Right before break, we started talking a little bit about the Agile idea and this idea of, iterative, Agile, fast waterfall. I enjoyed that. I may steal that eventually from you, Kelly. But there's also that also leads us down to the path of security and this idea of DevSecOps. So let me turn to Angie first about this and talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the government about this inching towards that concept.
Absolutely. So Leidos has adopted the best practice of DevSecOps, and one of the reasons that we've done that is the ability for software engineering teams to rebuild, rescan, retest every single night really adds to not only a better product, but also a more secure product. And we have a recent example with GSA where Red Hat had a major patch that we needed to release over 500 servers. And the industry standard said it should take 3 to 6 months, and we were able to implement it in less than 30 days. And so when you start seeing that type of productivity improvements for your teams, which also means all those 500 servers were more secure for some MAT time between 1 month and 5 months more, you really start getting a much more secure environment.
That's a great example of the GSA. Now you're able to do that because you're able to make a change, test the code, make a change, test the code versus, all right, let's make all these changes. Oh, we broke something. I mean, that's the difference here.
You're able to do it every single night and be able to repeat that process over and over again.
And if something does break, you can fix it immediately. Versus that end. And I think that's why it's so. People are moving toward it because of that ability to make the change. Maybe Todd, jump in a little bit and talk a little bit about how HHS is using that model too.
Well, so the DevOps model is something that we're trying to get underway in my office and the Chief Product Office. But we're not at the level of maturity. I was actually going to comment about cloud brokerage and the security brokerage model that Michelle had touched upon earlier. She talked about the customers were kind of finding their own solutions into the cloud, and then we were kind of, and I'm putting words in her mouth here, kind of summarizing, but then our governance strategies were kind of coming out of that. And I just wanted to mention that cloud security brokerage model, it's fascinating to me because if you look around government and you look at initiatives like CDM, and TIC and MTIPS and these other things that you mentioned, OMB, there's not always continuity between these things, and when you look at the DevOps sec or the cloud brokerage security models, they're often playing catch up with CDM. CDM didn't have the tool sets in it to really support, in my opinion, or the cloud first initiative. The tools weren't there, the tools to watch the data that was traversing. The TIC, there's still this conversation around the TIC, and I'm wondering anecdotally if there's really a necessity to even talk about antiquated terms like the TIC and MTIPS anymore, because in my experience with the cloud, these have become outdated artifacts. So I don't know what
frustrated ones too for a lot of
people. Yeah. So I don't know where that's gonna go. But I just there's too much conversation here. So
well, let me back you up for the cloud brokerage model because I think it's an interesting approach. So basically, what you guys are doing is you're setting up the sandbox, and you're saying, okay, if you're going to enter the sandbox, here's the requirements. But what you would do in that sandbox, you can do whatever you want. Again, simplifying it.
Right.
That's the concept.
And without having cleared my talking points with FDA ethics, I'll rely on things that I've already said. At FDA, we were moving toward that model of code reuse, that model of agility, with the goal of getting faster implementation times. And I think the best example was that infant formula tracking database that we used using a SaaS solution, all cloud-based, sponsored the ATO, soup to nuts, 90 days. Great solution, and it wasn't just a fast waterfall. It was re-engaging the customer every day and working with the customer in a really heightened manner and really listening to customer requirements.
And Kelly, from your perspective, I mean, that's the other piece that the DevSecOps is bringing in is you're working with the customer, you're making changes, but you're also ensuring that they're secure changes.
Of course. So VA handles tons of very sensitive health and personally identifiable data. So the one point I'll make on security, just from a business perspective, is we feel that government agencies need to take advantage of the private sector expertise. So the leading cloud providers are making huge investments in areas like security, much more than government spending. So our approach is encrypt everything. Take advantage of the private sector for encryption at the infrastructure level, but then also do encryption at the application level. So we think that approach is the best approach going forward.
Angie, Kelly just opened the door for you to walk through very nicely, but talk maybe a little bit about the cloud brokerage model that Todd brought up as well. Is that something that you're seeing more agencies asking about or at least interested in?
Yeah, I think most enterprises are trying to determine, and many of them are going in that direction, to set up their organization so that they can utilize the cloud in an easy way, but also with some boundaries and some expectations, whether it be policies, how they're going to go about using it. And I think that's a great way to set up that infrastructure and also encourage use, so you don't have multiple organizations going out and doing their own thing in their own way, which then honestly creates a long-term IT problem, because it's going to be something you have to rationalize down the road.
Michelle, jump in.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we did have business units jump out there quick and acquire a lot of things. But so what we're focused on now is creating centers of excellence with some of those early adopters, right? So that they can become service providers for other parts of the organizations who want to take advantage of some of those same solutions that they've invested in. And then from an enterprise perspective, you know, our PaaS and IaaS environment that we're building with the security templates built in and everything. So if you're a business unit with currently your own data center, you can bring that system into our cloud environment, take advantage and leverage the common controls we've put in place. That means our information assurance office only has to assess one environment. Our security folks only have to monitor in one environment. But if you absolutely have to have your own, we'll take standard template of the standard operating environment template and configuration, and those parameters get applied into those non-enterprise environments. And so those are all opportunities to sort of bring things together and create more of a cloud ecosystem that we can consider an enterprise and not individual business units out doing their own thing.
How much complaints you get when people want to step outside of the norm and you go, no, you're going to come back this way a little bit. You can do it on your own, but here's the sandbox you're going to play in.
Yeah, it's difficult because I mean everybody from a business unit perspective, you don't have as much to think about as you do from an enterprise perspective, right? So they can quickly move out on things, and so it's a challenge keeping up with the appetite that people have, because the cloud, I mean, everybody is excited about getting out there quickly, you know, deploying and delivering solutions, and so it's definitely a challenge. But you know, the security stick is a pretty big stick. I mean, no one wants to be the one who, you know, who puts an environment out there that ends up getting, you know, infiltrated or something. So that the security is a pretty big stick, and we have security working with us from an enterprise perspective. So that's the largest piece of leverage that we have right now.
Todd, did you want to jump in?
Just that Angie and Michelle both made excellent points about not reinventing the wheel, and it really speaks to why my office was created. So when I just want to be the first one on this show to say brokerage service and shared services, and you know, there are all these things that Optives are doing really well, and I think under the leadership of Beth at HHS, she had a vision to exploit those strengths and play to those strengths, hence my office. And as you've heard me talk about before, at the very beginning of my pipeline, there's this rationalization against what's already out there. And that was Beth's vision, that before we build anything, before we buy anything, we look at requests that come in, and they can be as big as the moon. They can be analyzing data sets, building databases or applications. It doesn't matter. When it comes in, the first thing we do is rationalize it, which speaks to that duplication issue I mentioned earlier. And it also starts chipping away at the interoperability issue, because through our conversations today, the code reuse and getting better at managing APIs and all that kind of stuff, I think it'll settle out to a more mature, long game.
We'll turn to Michelle, but I want to build on something that Kelly said about the encryption at the infrastructure layer, at the data layer. That's a huge issue for the State Department, and there's this push and pull with the cloud around this broader cybersecurity discussion. Maybe talk a little bit about how you guys are addressing the data challenge that you have to, again, send data from a post or a station in the Middle East to back to the U.S. and vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, it's the focus right now is on classifying the data, right? And because everything it's all about the data. And so if we can identify the categorization of data and then build security controls around whether it's a high level of data, moderate level, and they have different levels of security control. So we're focused on the data categorization, and we're just starting to look at analyze alternatives for information protection, digital rights management, and things of that nature, so that we can balance security with accessibility, right? I mean, you got to be concerned about security, but at the same time, the data needs to be accessible to the people who need to act on it or share it or just have access to it. And so the figuring out how much security to put on top of the data when we're trying to move it, how much encryption is the encryption that one system is using going to conflict with the encryption in another system, which is one of the things we're dealing with right now. It's a challenge. It's a challenge we're struggling with.
Angie, maybe jump in a little bit about that secure data piece, because I think that the challenge that Michelle described is something that's not unique just to state, but probably with most agencies.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to consider when you think about data. One is certainly security, and in the U.S., we're a little bit behind from probably policy and regulation on which data needs to be protected and how, and so organizations are trying to figure out for themselves how to best do that. And Michelle has a much larger challenge, because across the globe there's lots of different data privacy standards, and you have to follow all of those. And then the last thing that I'll say is that most organizations have so much data at their fingertips, and they probably don't even use a fraction of it. And so I think the organizations in the future that will absolutely succeed will be the ones that understand not only how to classify their data, but how to best utilize it to make their businesses more efficient, how to allow their talent to be best used, and to be able to drive the best decision making for whether it's their end customers, their stakeholders, or their enterprise as a whole.
This has been just a fascinating conversation. We're just about out of time, so let me just kind of let's leave the audience with a little bit of thought. Todd, let me start with you, since we started the whole discussion with you. We'll come back with you. And all this, what we talked about, cloud, DevOps, DevSecOps, cybersecurity, data, they're all really driving toward this IT modernization vision that's been ongoing, I would say, for the last 20 years. So maybe where do you see all these pieces fitting together to drive HHS toward IT modernization?
So I think it's bigger than HHS now. I think that the federal leadership at large, at the GSA, OMB, and the Federal Cio Council are aware of the opportunity that all these new technologies present, and we've learned a lot of lessons. From when I spoke to the CDM, having to catch up with CDM, things like that. But I didn't make that up. Other smart people told me stuff like that. So I think that we're going to coalesce around a new pathway. And I know this. I spent the day at GSA yesterday. So in my role, I've been put on a committee for the Federal Cio Council. And the goal is to start to get ahead of these problems. Like, we have a problem with data centers being vacated so fast that we have vacant real estate, and we need to somehow make sure that real estate is available to be repurposed. For example, so as we move to this new future, there are, we're moving from the wagon wheel to the tire, and so there's going to be a change in paradigm. And I think that staying the course and learning those lessons from an HHS perspective. Wrap this up quick. I think my position speaks to what we're trying to do.
Okay. Kelly, real quick.
Yep, so we view all of these things as enablers. So it's all about delivering better, modern products to veterans and end users. So all of our digital services teams across agencies partner with our awesome agency colleagues to have an impact. right? So the biggest blocker for us is we need more people. So if you are out there and you want to work on a cause that you're passionate about and you want to have a real impact, please come join us at the U.S. Digital Service. I joined the VA team because my dad's a Vietnam combat veteran, and this is the best job I'll ever have.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you.
there's not a better a promotion than that in terms of like.
I feel very lucky, so
Yes.
thank you.
All right, Angie.
So, I think technology is amazing because it's constantly changing, and we have things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and voice that is really going to transform not only every business process that we do today, but it's going to transform how our workforce operates. And so CIOs and organizations and companies that really embrace technology, even if it's on a small scale, to figure out how to make their organizations more efficient, to make them more agile, will really benefit in the future because their workforce will be completely transformed ahead of other organizations.
All right, and Michelle, you get the last word.
And I think at the State Department, the vision for IT is that of a mobile diplomat, right? So being able to leverage the cloud to access accurate and up-to-date information from to conduct transactions or exchange data securely from any device, anytime, anywhere around the world, right? To conduct the State Department's global diplomatic mission. And I think that we're on track to realize that vision with the centers of excellence that I talked about around the most widely adopted cloud solutions, emphasis on our mobile computing program, which we didn't talk much about, but we are emphasizing that, and then improving our overseas networks, and then again, keeping cybersecurity as the #1 priority.
All right, very good. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today. This has been just a fascinating conversation. You've been listening to the panel discussion, Foundations of Enterprise IT, Modernizing for a Secure Agile Government, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I've been your host, Jason Miller. Let me thank my guests for today. Greg Garcia, the Chief Information Officer at G6 of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Michelle Sparrow-Walker, the Department Director in the Information Resource Management Bureau Systems and Integration Office at the Department of State, Todd Simpson, the Chief Product Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services, Kelly O'Connor, a Product Manager for the Veterans Affairs Department's Digital Services team, and Angie Heisey, the President of the Civil Group for Leidos. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com, search Enterprise IT.
On behalf of Federal News Radio, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.